So, good day, everyone. We're here for a Conversations with segment with none other than Mr. W. Norman Bodden, MBE, OBE. As many of you will be aware, he's written a book recently entitled Against All Odds. I haven't read it yet, to be honest, but I have heard that it's an amazing read, Mr. Norman. What made you decide to write a book now?
I had never ever planned in my lifetime to write a book. That, Sandra, that was the fuzziest thought that I had.
Yes.
But Virginia and the children and some of the grandchildren kept after me and saying, you should write a book. You're retired now. You got nothing home to do but aggravate Virginia. So why don't you sit down and write a book?
Yeah.
So I started it, I think, in September last year.
Wow.
It took me about 4 months working off and on and doing the typing myself on my computer.
Amazing.
So I did the whole thing, and then I got in touch with a nice lady from CML Publishing, Mrs. Karen Chin, and she was a great assistance in publishing it and had it printed in Miami. And I thought they'd done a pretty good job because I was concerned that it wasn't long enough. But I have found that when you write a autobiography and you put too much detail in it, it becomes voluminous, and people don't really read it until they get halfway through and they give up. So I thought that it was kind of short, but I think it covered my life the way that I wanted to read.
Yes. Well, this is amazing. So just in September, you started writing this. It didn't take you very long.
4 months.
Amazing.
Working on and off.
So the title of the book is Against All Odds. Did you come up with that title yourself? And if so, why did you choose that one?
I did because my mother was handicapped, right? And she showed me by example that you can survive through hard work and honesty against all odds.
Wow.
And that gave me the idea to use it as a title. Additionally, when somebody comes from my background, from an impoverished background, and they can run for public office and win 3 consecutive elections by topping the polls in all 3, and end up being the Minister of Tourism and Aviation for 8 years,
Amazing.
that too was achieved against all odds. So those 2 reasons were why I chose the title, because I felt that a lot of times people with my background have to achieve things against all odds. They have to work hard and prove themselves, but with honesty and hard work you can do it.
So this is amazing already. Just in your initial comments, we hear of you starting out with some hardships in life. So let's go back. How old are you now, Mr. Norman?
I am 86 years old.
Oh, amazing.
I'll be 87 on October the 2nd.
Beautiful. So let's go back 84, 83, 80 years ago when you were just a little boy. What was it like? Tell us a little bit about your parents, who they were, and what was it like growing up in Cayman at that time?
Well, life was hard. The population was small, but I tell you, people were happy. They had, but it's really I'm talking about the 40s and 50s and 60s. You had no bills, no computers, no technology at the level you have it today. And life was difficult, but it was very ordinary life, but I think that people were very happy. They had not the bills facing them that you have today.
Right.
And mosquitoes, of course, was a problem.
Yes.
And those were brought under better control. And that helped to make life more comfortable. I'm from a single parent home.
Oh, right.
My grandfather was the dad role model in my life.
Okay.
And he sent me to public school, where I was taught by Thomas F. Hill, a Jamaican school teacher. And it was a 1-room classroom, and he taught every subject. But my grandfather saw that I walked to school and got an education at the level that you could get it in those days. And of course, after leaving public school at the age of 13, I went to CCC school, and a fine Christian lady, Miss Ina Marion, helped me to pay tuition, and I graduated from Triple C School in 1953 with a 93 GPA.
Wow. So you mentioned that your mom, two interesting things you mentioned about her is that she was a single mom and that she had a handicap. Tell us a little bit about her, because it seems like she was really, really important in your life.
She really was important, because I saw her, Sandra, do the neighbor's laundry in order to survive.
Right.
Life was hard, and but I tell you the truth, although we were from a very poor family, I had a lot of friends that were almost in the same boat as I. And you never ever realized or thought about being poor, because you were free to do the things they did and go to places they did, and you didn't feel out of order or out of place, because a lot of people were alike and shared the same problem.
Right. Amazing. What was the handicap that your mom had?
She was born with a hearing
impediment. Okay. Right.
And I think if she had been born in this day and age where medicine has progressed to the level that it is, that she would have been able to have an operation that she could hear.
Right. And how did that, her having that hearing impediment, how has that impacted you? I'm supposing that you're probably more sympathetic towards people who have any sort of a disability.
Very much so.
Yes.
Well, it happened that it became a way of life for me. I could communicate with her.
Yes.
And when she had to leave where she lived to go to do the neighborhood laundry to make a few shillings a day, I used to accompany her, because with her not being able to hear properly, I was afraid that a car might hit her, although there were not many cars in those days like what you have now, not even a semblance of it.
Yes.
But I used to accompany her, and when she was finished doing the neighborhood laundry, I used to go and get her and walk back home.
Beautiful. Very, very nice. Do you have any siblings?
No, I have no brother.
Child.
I was an only child.
Oh, wow. Right. So tell us a little bit then about your grandfather. And you mentioned that he was your father figure. And who was he, and what sort of impressions did he make on you as a young man?
His name was Levi Bodden. And in his day he went to sea. And he was able to buy almost an acre of land and build a lumber home within a zinc roof on North Church Street.
Right.
So he was very successful as a seaman. But as he got older, he had to stop going to sea, quit going to sea, and he became a fisherman by trade. And he used to fish and for a living. And I used to have to go down on Whitehall Bay where he came in, string the fish up, weigh it out, price it, and carry it in the back roads of Georgetown on the Marl Road in order to sell it.
Wow.
So that he had at least 6 shillings or 7 shillings that he could buy groceries from the store and make a meal with the fish he caught, plus whatever he sold. He used that to put into the farm, the cost of living.
Wow. So your family home is right here in South Sound then?
No, my family home is in North Church Street, in the area commonly known as Whitehall.
Ah, I see. Okay. All right. Very good. So industrious from a very young age. You weren't afraid of hard work, that's for sure.
No, not at all. Because the first pair of shoes that I owned, I bought from money that I had earned at cleaning Dixon Graveyard. The government every December would give a certain budget to have the graveyard cleaned up for the holidays, and they used to hire boys of school age and other men as well to clean the bush out of Dixon Graveyard, so it was nice and tidy for Christmas. And I used to work there, and I earned enough to buy a pair of shoes when I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
Wow. Amazing. I keep hearing you use this term shillings, and to me it sounds so strange. Was that the currency that we actually used back in those days?
Pounds, shilling, and pence.
Wow.
Yeah, a shilling was about 10 cents now, I think.
Yeah, right.
And a threepence, that's 3 pence. But Caymanians call it a threepence.
Okay.
Yeah, Trapance. I spelled it in the book that I wrote.
Beautiful. So you started Triple C, then you said the kindness of, someone there allowed you to basically afford to pay the tuition.
What she did, she was Messina Marin from the Marin family, which was a very prominent family, and they were into shipping and merchandising. They had a grocery store, a shoe store, a dry goods store, and they had a warehouse. They used to sell to smaller shopkeepers. And she had no children, never married, had no children. She took an interest in me because my grandfather used to watch Marin's store. After he gave up fishing, he became a watchman for H.O. Marin and Company. And they used to stop by in the car at night to check on him, as I said in my book, probably to be nice, but also to make sure he was still awake. and and I got to know the family very well, and Messina Marin took an interest in me. And when, in fact, in public school, what caused me to consider going to Triple C or wanting to go to Triple C was the Presbyterian Church opened their prep school at the same time, and all the children except myself transferred to the prep school that the Presbyterian Church started. So when I went back to school in August or September, I was the only one left in my class.
Wow.
So I decided I would like to go. I had gone to Standard 6 in the public school system, and I wanted to go Triple C but couldn't afford it. So I let Messina know, and she wrote to Anderson, Indiana, where the Church of God had a church that they associated with, and they sponsored me for the first year. And when I went to Triple C, they put me in 7th grade, and then I was able to skip 8th grade and go into 9th grade. So I went to high school and completed it in 3 years.
Wow.
And she, after the church sponsorship was used, she herself used to finance me and pay my tuition from her own resources.
Wow.
But when I left Triple C school and got a job, I was one of the fortunate ones that didn't have to go to sea. I got a job with LAXA in 1955 with LAXA Airlines. And when I got a job, I started the Marin Scholarship Fund. And with the help of some friends, we raised quite a bit of money, and that fund was used to help unfortunate high schoolers who had a problem paying their tuition.
Right.
The funds would be taken from that fund to pay the tuition, and many students benefited from it.
Yes.
And it was understanding or the plan that when they graduated and got a job, they would replenish the fund to help other children that needed financial assistance in completing their education.
Wow.
And I think it's still going up to today.
Wow, that's amazing that at such a young age, immediately you wanted to find a way to return the kindness that you had experienced.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Because there were children that their father had a stroke or they were incapacitated in some way, and they couldn't afford to continue their education. And that fund came in very handy to help the unfortunate ones that couldn't afford to continue their education.
Right. Now, you said that you were one of the fortunate ones to not have to go to sea. And I've never really quite thought about it as, being fortunate to be able to stay and remain here. So when you make that statement, why do you think it was a good fortune to be able to remain in Cayman?
Well, I was able to remain at home with my family.
Yes.
And I didn't have to face the hazards of the seaman. In fact, I think I was the kind of individual that had I gone to sea, I probably would have only gone a year or two when I wanted to be back home with my family. So I think I was fortunate because in being in the airline business, I did a lot of paperwork and documents and tickets for people that was shipping out with national bulk carriers. And I would see their family crying at the airport when they had to leave to go to sea. So I thought it was a good thing that I was able to get a job and stay at home. And that, Sandra, was a career of 25 years with the airline business.
Amazing. So you were, I guess, was it reservations manager? What was your position there with the airline?
I started as a ticket agent,
Okay.
writing tickets and checking in passengers. And Laxa Airlines at the time, they had an Englishman, Peter Hales Coleman, who was their manager. He had an agency, but Laxa and him had a disagreement. So they sent one of their Costa Rican representatives to be the station manager here. And after spending a year here, they promoted me to station manager.
Wow.
Yeah, and I got that job with Laxa through Aileen Marion. Aileen Marion was going to Emory University to study to be a dentist. And properly, I was afraid that a car might hit her, although there were not many cars in those days like what you have now. not even a semblance of it.
Yes.
But I used to accompany her, and when she was finished doing the neighborhood's laundry, I used to go and get her and walk back home.
Beautiful. Very, very nice. Do you have any siblings?
No, I have
were
no
only
brother.
child.
I was an only child.
Oh, wow. Right. So tell us a little bit then about your grandfather. And you mentioned that he was your father figure. And who was he, and what sort of impressions did he make on you as a young man?
His name was Levi Bodden, and in his day he went to sea, and he was able to buy almost an acre of land and build a lumber home within a zinc roof on North Church Street.
Right.
So he was very successful as a seaman. But as he got older, he had to stop going to sea, quit going to sea, and he became a fisherman by trade. And he used to fish and for a living, and I used to have to go down on Whitehall Bay where he came in, string the fish up, weigh it out, price it, and carry it in the back roads of Georgetown on the Marl Road in order to
Yes.
sell it.
Wow.
So that he had at least 6 shillings or 7 shillings that he could buy groceries from the store and make a meal with the fish he caught. That's whatever he sold, he used that to put into the family cot of living.
Wow. So your family home is right here in South Sound then?
No, my family home is in North Church Street, in
North
the area
Church Street,
commonly known as Whitehall.
Ah, I see. Okay. All right. Very good. So industrious from a very young age. You weren't afraid of hard work, that's for sure.
No, not at all. Because the first pair of shoes that I owned, I bought from money that I had earned at cleaning Dixon Graveyard. The government every December would give a certain budget to have the graveyard cleaned up for the holidays, and they used to hire boys of school age and other men as well to clean the bush out of Dixon Graveyard, so it was nice and tidy for Christmas. And I used to work there, and I earned enough to buy a pair of shoes when I was probably 10 or 11 years old.
Wow. Amazing. I keep hearing you use this term shillings, and to me it sounds so strange. Was that the currency that we actually used back in those days?
Pounds, shilling, and pence.
Wow.
Yeah, a shilling was about 10 cents now, I think.
Yeah, right.
And a threepence, that's 3 pence. But Caymanians call it a threepence.
Okay.
Yeah, Trapance. I spelled it in the book that I wrote.
Beautiful. So you started Triple C, then you said the kindness of, someone there allowed you to basically afford to pay the tuition.
What she did, she was Messina Marin from the Marin family, which was a very prominent family, and they were into shipping and merchandising. They had a grocery store, a shoe store, a dry goods store, and they had a warehouse. They used to sell to smaller shopkeepers. And she had no children, never married, had no children. She took an interest in me because my grandfather used to watch Marin's store. After he gave up fishing, he became a watchman for H.O. Marin and Company. And they used to stop by in the car at night to check on him, as I said in my book, probably to be nice, but also to make sure he was still awake. And and I got to know the family very well, and Messina Marin took an interest in me. And when, in fact, in public school, what caused me to consider going to Triple C, or wanting to go to Triple C, was the Presbyterian Church opened their prep school at the same time, and all the children except myself transferred to the prep school that the Presbyterian Church started. So when I went back to school in August or September, I was the only one left in my class.
Wow.
So I decided I would like to go. I had gone to Standard 6 in the public school system, and I wanted to go Triple C but couldn't afford it. So I let Messina know, and she wrote to Anderson, Indiana, where the Church of God had a church that they associated with, and they sponsored me for the first year. And when I went to Triple C, they put me in 7th grade, and then I was able to skip 8th grade and go into 9th grade. So I went to high school and completed it in 3 years.
Wow.
And she, after the church sponsorship was used, she herself used to finance me and pay my tuition from her own resources.
Wow.
But when I left Triple C school and got a job, I was one of the fortunate ones that didn't have to go to sea. I got a job with LAXA in 1955 with LAXA Airlines. And when I got a job, I started the American Scholarship Fund. And with the help of some friends, we raised quite a bit of money. And that fund was used to help unfortunate high schoolers who had a problem paying their tuition.
Right.
That the funds would be taken from that fund to pay the tuition, and many students benefited from it.
Yes.
And it was understanding or the plan that when they graduated and got a job, they would replenish
They
the
would pay
fund
it forward.
to help other children that needed financial assistance in completing their education.
Wow.
And I think it's still going up to today.
Wow, that's amazing that at such a young age, immediately you wanted to find a way to return the kindness that you had experienced.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Because there were children that their father had a stroke or they were incapacitated in some way, and they couldn't afford to continue their education. And that fund came in very handy to help unfortunate ones that couldn't afford to continue their education.
Right. Now, you said that you were one of the fortunate ones to not have to go to sea. I've never really quite thought about it as, being fortunate to be able to stay and remain here. So when you make that statement, why do you think it was a good fortune to be able to remain in Cayman?
Well, I was able to remain at home with my family.
Yes.
And I didn't have to face the hazards of a seaman. In fact, I think I was the kind of individual that had I gone to sea, I probably would have only gone a year or two when I wanted to be back home with my family. So
Yeah.
I think I was fortunate because in being in the airline business, I did a lot of paperwork and documents and tickets for people that were shipping out with national bulk carriers. And I would see their family crying at the airport when they had to leave to go to sea. So I thought it was a good thing that I was able to get a job and stay at home. And that, Sandra, was a career of 25 years with the airline business.
Amazing. So you were, I guess, was it reservations manager? What was your position there with the airline?
I started as a ticket agent.
Okay.
Of writing tickets and checking in passengers. And LAXA Airlines at the time, they had an Englishman, Peter Hales Coleman, who was their manager. He had an agency, but LAXA and him had a disagreement. So they sent one of their Costa Rican representatives to be the station manager here. And after spending a year here, they promoted me to station manager.
Wow.
Yeah, and I got that job with LAXA through Aileen Marion. Aileen Marion was going to Emory University to study to be a dentist. And manager for LAXA Airlines after they recalled the representative that they had sent here. And as you know, LAXA was instrumental along with government in starting Cayman Airways. And I worked with the airlines, and I was the managing director of Cayman Airways for 12 years.
So you were the first managing director at Cayman Airways?
From 1980 till 92.
Amazing.
And 92 was when I went into politics.
Okay.
But there was always a question, Sandra, of why government became involved in the airline business.
Yes.
They became involved in the airline business to support their growing tourism industry, because government nor Cayman couldn't afford to be dependent on service from foreign carriers, because the day that that's unprofitable, they will leave and put their airplanes to work on more profitable routes. So what Cayman Airways does is provide a guarantee that government will not have to be dependent on foreign carriers entirely. We're dependent on them and they provide a service. But for example, during hurricanes, the airline that evacuates people out of Grand Cayman to safety in Miami is Cayman Airways.
Yes.
And they fly until the very last minute before the hurricane strikes. So that is a service that provides.
Absolutely.
And I must say that the place where Cayman Airways is today, I missed this out in my book, and I should have expanded on that, and I want to take this opportunity to do so. Cayman Airways today has a fleet of 737-800s, the MAX aircraft, 4 of them, and that is supported by the SAB and the Twin Otter for the inter-island service. And what is forgotten sometime is that Cayman Airways provides an inter-island service at a loss. So government has to subsidize it and face the reality of owning an airline is an expensive business. But today Cayman Airways is flying high, and the plan to replace their 737-300s was devised by the former chairman of the board of Cayman Airways, Philip Rankin. And I served 3 years as the deputy chairman along with Philip Rankin, and I was very impressed at the management and the way that Philip operated. He operated as if he was on Cayman Airways payroll, and he didn't get a penny for it, but he provided, and Paul Tibbetts and Fabian Worms, I think, do an excellent job of operating the airline. Their safety measure and the programs they have in place are the same as any large carrier.
Yes.
And I think we have a good record there, and we want to protect that.
Yes. Wow. So you started out with a foreign airline that developed into helping Cayman Airways get started formally, and then you were the managing director there for quite a number of years. What an amazing professional career, but you didn't stop there. You've done so much since then professionally. So tell us a little bit more about some of the wonderful things that you've accomplished. You've talked about politics, but we're going to get into that here in a little bit. But outside of politics, what else have you done professionally?
Well, in 1980 was a year that changed the course of events for myself.
Right.
Because what I did, I resigned as managing director of Cayman Airways after 12 years. I stood for election in 1980. I opened a travel agency called Cayman Travel Service, that's still in business. And I took a job in the private sector for a while. So that went on for quite a while. Of course, I served 12 years in politics.
Right.
And after 12 seems to follow me, 12 years as managing director and 12 in politics. But anyway, I served 12 years in politics, and after that, I went back to work for Cayman Travel Services as the managing director. And after that, I sold the shares that Celia Rutten and myself had in Cayman Travel Services. And Sherry and myself started Bodden Corporate Services. And then Sherry and Lynn and myself and Caroline Balls also worked for Bodden Corporate.
Yes.
And Sherry and Lynn started Bodden and Bodden Attorneys at Law. And we operated that successfully for 20 years. Those two companies, Bodden Corporate and Bodden Attorneys at Law, for about 18 to 20 years. And in 99 we decided to sell the companies, and we sold them, and I retired, of course, in November of 99.
Wow. Such an amazing
all
career.
this is recorded in the book.
Yes, absolutely. Now, of course, I'm sure a lot of our listeners are listening to this and they're amazed at what you've done, but let's talk about politically what you're up to for those 12 years as well. So you talked about being in a ministerial position. Why did you decide to run for politics? What was it about politics in those days that appealed to you?
Well, I tell you what, politics in those days were were not organized like they are today.
Yes.
Although they had teams that they called parties that they called teams and whatnot. But back in 1980, politicians were not paid a salary, right? And some of the senior members of the House would look around in their constituency to see if they found anybody who might be a good candidate and encourage them to stand for election. And Captain Charles Cockernall and Aileen Mirren were two good friends of mine, and they encouraged me to run in 1980. And I told Aileen that if he was my campaign manager, I would run.
Okay.
So we started having a few meetings around Georgetown. We had a budget of $1,200
Wow.
for the campaign, and I ran in 1980 as an independent candidate on my own. And when the results came in, I was surprised and my opponents were shocked.
Oh, wow.
Because I topped the poll. I topped the polls in 1980 election.
Oh my gosh.
And Miss Anna Hulda Bodden and Truman Bodden, who were two stalwarts that had years of political life, they were elected the same year that I was. But I was surprised that with their experience and involvement, that a first-time candidate like myself would top the polls. So I was very pleased with the results. And I served 4 years as a backbencher.
Right.
And then in 1984, I stood for election again and got elected to Executive Council. And then I became the Minister for Tourism, Aviation and Trade.
Wow. Who were you running against in 1980? Who was your opponents at that time?
Miss Anna Hulda Bodden and
Okay.
Truman Bodden.
Okay, so you beat them out. They still got in, but
They got in, but...
you beat them up for that top spot.
Right. I became the first elected member for Georgetown.
Amazing.
And I don't say this in a boastful way because people who know me well know that I'm very humble. But I was only the second member of the Legislative Assembly that was unanimously elected, I should say, to Executive Council. Yeah.
Amazing.
The other 11 and myself voted for my position in Executive Council.
Wow. So that speaks highly of what your counterparts in politics certainly thought of you as well.
Yeah, I was very pleased.
So you said that back then politicians didn't actually get a salary. So you were still working another job, right? And
Right.
then
I was still
serving
with the
country.
airline in 1980.
Okay.
I was still with the airlines, but I took a chance, I guess, and retired from the airlines and went into politics in 80, 84, and 88.
At what point did they start paying politicians?
I think it was 1982
Okay.
or thereabout.
Yeah.
I think it was Miss Ezra Miller that brought the matter to the House,
Right.
and an agreement was reached that they would pay the salary. But of course, it was very small. Prior to that, we were paid, I think, $26 a meeting that you attended before they were put on the salary. But it was just a stipend.
Yes. Wow. And you talked about having a $1,200 campaign budget. I guess back in those days that might have been okay, but in this day and age, that probably couldn't get you much of anything done anymore.
No, it certainly couldn't. That wouldn't last you for one night.
Yeah,
But what we did those days, that funds was used to take a few ads in the local newspaper and also mail-outs.
Right.
We used to do letters and mail out to constituencies, to constituents in your constituency. We used to do a mail out to them to
Yes.
encourage them to support you for the upcoming election.
Yes. Wonderful.
Very simple.
Yeah, very simple. So you were in politics for 12 years. You served as minister. What was a big takeaway from your political career? What did you, if you had to pick sort of maybe a single lesson that you learned from that time frame of your life, what would you say that would be?
I found out that when you make a decision on a project or you make a political decision, to stand by it, because you can't be all things to all people. And I found out whether it's popular or not.
Yeah.
If you are convinced that it's right, stand by your conviction.
Wow. So true.
Very much
Very
so.
true. Very true. And did you have any periods in politics that you would have really been tested when you had to take your own advice and just stand by your position politically, where decisions might not have been popular, but you said this is the right thing to do?
Well, a lot of that was financial support for Cayman Airways. The 8 years that I was a member for tourism, aviation and trade, Cayman Airways also came under my portfolio. And Cayman Airways, unfortunately, at some stage became a political football.
Right.
And I thought it was very unfair to the airline that was providing a good service and to the large number of Caymanians that were employed there. So it was very important because, you know, Cayman Airways contributes something like 200 million to the economy of this country. And it provides jobs through that for Caymanians and non-Caymanians as well. But I think it was very important. And I was determined, because we had some pressure from the UK at one stage about the cost of Cayman Airways to the government.
Oh, wow.
And I was determined that Cayman Airways was not going under on my watch because I realized the importance of it. And I was determined to see that Cayman Airways continued in the air at whatever cost that government could afford to keep it going, because we could not abandon such an important service to these islands to build up our tourism and to provide convenient, safe travel for Caymanians, and especially for seamen that at that time contributed so much to our economy.
Imagine. But I guess it's a wonderful thing that you actually had the early experience in the airline business to make you appreciate the importance of our national airline.
That is very true, Sandra.
Yeah, amazing. Well, let's talk about your family, because obviously we couldn't talk about Mr. Norman without talking about his beautiful family. So you have a lovely wife, Miss Virginia. Tell us, how did you meet her, and what were the early days of courtship like?
Well, I was dating a fine young lady from Maryland, Georgetown.
Oh, okay.
And I dated her for a couple of years. But my eye was on her first cousin that lived next door. And that was Virginia Arch. And she was 15 and I was 18.
Okay.
So I think it was in 1953, I made a move and told her that I was in love with her.
Oh, wow.
And she told me that she liked me too. And I was very happy with that, because Virginia came from a different background than I did, from a different family. She was from the Arches,
Yes.
and they were shipwrights and building contractors, and considered fairly well off for that day and age. And after Virginia and I fell in love with each other, her father didn't think I was the right choice for her. And so we had to resort to writing, and he forbid her to be seen in a place with me.
Oh, wow.
But I pursued her at every given opportunity.
Yes.
And
Amazing.
and he thought I wasn't the right choice for his only daughter, which I guess that's the prerogative of a father, to guide their children into choosing the right partner in life.
Yes.
But we resorted to writing love letters to each other. And they had a lady from East End who used to work with Miss Bride, who was Virginia's mother. And she used to bring the love letters from Virginia to me, and I used to send mine back to her. Also, when she walked everywhere she went, so when she walked from her home on Smith Road to church, I would get that opportunity to talk to her until she got to go to the Presbyterian Church for a Christian Endeavour meeting. So, and when she was out of church and walking back home, I used to walk her home. So I got to see her at those odd times. But the time came when Virginia wanted me to be able to come to the house to visit her. And she wrote her father a letter and told him that she was in love with me and she wanted me to be able to come to the house. So I went to, a meeting was arranged between her father and mother and myself.
Wow.
And I went there trembling, knock knees and worried. But I told him man to man that I was in love with her and I planned to
Yes.
marry her.
Oh, wow.
So we became engaged, and in a year or two after that, we were married.
Wow.
And
So you stood your ground for the lovely Miss Virginia.
oh yes, I couldn't get her out of my mind. But
Yeah.
things were so simple those days too, you
Yes.
know. And everybody knew everybody else. And we were married in 1959. And this year will be 63 years
Beautiful.
of marriage. We have 3 lovely children that we love dearly and have set good
Yes.
examples for them to follow. Because both Virginia and I are members of the Church of God Universal.
Yes.
And we attend there. And Karen is in the church, and her husband raised an ordained minister.
Yes.
Sharon and Patrick don't profess, but they know the church, they know the truth, and they support the church. And we have 9 lovely grandchildren who have taken advantage of the opportunities available to young people these days. And among them we have a doctor, an MD,
Yes.
we have architects, we have
Beautiful.
masters of business administration,
Yeah.
and different vocations that they were able to get a university degree, which I couldn't afford to get in my day because I couldn't afford to go to college. I had my handicapped mother to support, and I chose to stay here and do the best I could with what I had.
Now, was your mom still alive when you got married?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay.
yes.
Very good. So she was able to see you happy and
Oh, yes.
start to have a family of your own.
Right. And she knew she knew the children.
Yes.
I used to take the children to see her.
Yeah. Beautiful. Wonderful. Wow. That's quite an amazing love story because in this day and age it's so different. Courtship is different.
Right.
But, it's refreshing to hear that although it was a bit of a difficult situation in the beginning because it was forbidden love, but you just stuck with it and you stuck your ground and did it in the respectful way, letting her father know exactly what your intentions were.
Right.
Yes.
They're always still the best, Sandra.
Yeah.
They're always still the best.
Yeah.
I believe in
Beautiful.
old-fashioned Christianity, and I believe in traditional values.
Wonderful. So 63 years.
That's right.
Wow. Did it go by in a jiffy?
Well, there have been
Yeah.
good times and bad times,
Yes,
but
of
our
course.
love has seen us through.
Absolutely.
And Virginia is not only my wife, but she's my partner and best friend.
Yes. Beautiful. And I hardly ever see the two of you apart because every time I see her out at Thai Orchid for lunch or anywhere, the two of you are right there together.
That's right.
Yeah.
We have become accustomed to each other like Siamese twins.
Beautiful, beautiful. And you've got, like you said, 3 beautiful children. Tell us a little bit about, raising your kids when they were younger. Were you an active father? Again, coming from a traditional environment, of course, we know Miss Virginia would have stayed at home and been the primary caregiver for the children. But what are some of your memories with your kids growing up in those days?
Well, what I remember about them, I had to travel quite a bit, both as a member of the airline company I worked for, and Cayman Airways, and then with LAX Airlines, I had to travel quite a bit. So Virginia did not work out. We had a very small salary to live on, but we managed with what we had. So Virginia was always at home to take care of the children.
Right.
While I was gone, I spoke a while ago about not having to go to sea, but I had to be absent from home quite a bit in my airline career as well.
Right.
And Virginia was at home to take care of them. I remember being away sometimes and talking to her and finding out that they were sick with fever or had some problem, and there was always a lot of anxiety with things. They had been absent from home and hearing that some of the children are ill. But I was involved to a great extent with their education. I saw that all three of them went to Triple C school and graduated, and Sharon and Patrick went to college and got their degrees. KK went to college, but she she was unhappy there, so she came back home and went to work for the airlines as well. And she met Ray there, and her life has turned out beautifully.
Yes,
they have a very
absolutely.
fine family, and Shara has 3 children that have done well. Patrick has 3, and KK has 3. So their marriages have worked out.
Yes.
And I know that they continue to take good care of their children and see that they're well provided for.
Yeah, beautiful. So everybody had 3 kids.
Right.
Amazing. So there's that 12 again that you were referencing, you know. If you had your 3 with the 3 of yours, you got the 12, so beautiful. So such an amazing story, Mr. Norman. You still, I feel like there could be a part 2 to this book. I don't know if you're contemplating it or not. But when you were writing this book, what were some of the points that you thought to yourself, oh, I must absolutely include that in the book?
Well, let me see. I can't think right now.
There was so much. Well, you covered your political career, Chapter 7. You talked about the survival of Cayman Airways. And again, we just touched on that and how pivotal and important that was. A man of faith. I love that you included this chapter in here as Chapter 19. Again, talking about your Christian values and, you know, being a member of the Church of God Universal. Are you a deacon in the church, or do you do any sort of active things?
No, what I've done in the church, I started a men's prayer breakfast on Saturday mornings, and that operated for several years. It's not ongoing at the present time.
Okay.
I also used to be chairman of a lot of the church meetings and guide the meeting in that direction. And I also wrote tributes for special occasions to different members of the church. But I'm not a deacon.
Right.
Virginia preaches, but not me.
Oh, okay. Wow, beautiful. Well, you know, we've got to interview her as well, because I tell you what, the women in this country were the backbone for so many families.
Right, that's true.
Yeah, we definitely include them in our Conversations With segment. So I love some of the photographs that you've included in the picture, in your book as well. These are some real nice ones that you must have pulled out of your archives to be able to include, including one of the very first, I guess, pictures of Cayman Airways.
Right.
Absolutely gorgeous. So in the end, towards the end of your book, you say that you want to be remembered as a God-fearing family man and honest politician. Talk to us about that a little bit.
Well, to me, family is very, very important because, as you can well imagine, the family that I have today is a family that God blessed us with.
Yes.
And they are very important to me. They're critical to my life. Whatever decisions I make include families, my family. And I think, you know, that the family is very important to me, as I've said. And just
putting that first, putting God first, family, and then, you know, being loyal to country through politics and being a hardworking person in general.
Right.
Yeah, beautiful. Let me talk a little bit, Chapter 7, where you talk about tourism in its infancy. And you talk about the Civil Aviation Department arranged for kerosene flare pots to be placed about every 20 feet apart on the threshold on both sides of the runway. Now here we are complaining that we don't have covering from rain, but it looks like the real concern back then was just everything from safety. So you were using actual kerosene flare pots.
In aviation, safety is the number one priority. Safety is the number one priority, and that cannot be overstressed. But of course, you know, we throw a switch now in the tower, and all the whole runway and ramp and everything is lit up. But those days we didn't have anything like that. We had kerosene flare pots that used to be put out. They had to be oiled, the wicks had to be trimmed, and they would be lit and put so many feet apart on both sides of the runway and at the entrance and departure, the end of the runway, so that they could have a proper guide at night. But sometimes what happened was that a downpour rain would come
Oh,
and
gosh.
out the flare pots, and the pilot had to go in a holding pattern overhead until you could relight these pots so that they could see how to land the aircraft.
Wow. And you mentioned so many other people in here, Mr. Benny Ross, who was the refueling foreman, and his children used to help
Yeah,
to
that's
make sure that
right.
those were kept alit. So incredibly interesting. Well, I'm looking forward to reading the book. Like I said, I've not had an opportunity to get my copy yet, but I know Karen KK has promised me a copy, and so I'll definitely get it and read it. This is part of Cayman history, and I think that our individual stories make our collective history, right?
Right.
So I appreciate you taking the time out of your day and spending some of it with us. I know that our viewers are going to absolutely love this interview because they love anything Caymanian, Cayman history, hearing from people who remember the days when,
Right.
absolutely beautiful. So thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to spend with us.
Well, thank you very much, Sandra. It's a privilege. I count it a privilege to be interviewed by you,
Thank you.
and I hope it'll be well received publicly. I'm sure it will be. But a lot that I've told you today is also recorded in my book, and when you read it, you will see exactly what I'm talking about, and probably
Yes.
give you a better idea than what I have done of letting you know what I wrote about. But I must say this, in the book, I started out by saying Whitehall, the area that I was born and raised in, there used to be a lot of neighborhood quarrels, rows we used to call it,
Okay.
and they would hurl insults at each other, and the other party would say, "Where did you get that from?"
Yes.
Says, "Well, your name is on the Mile Road, so I think your program is appropriately named."
Yes.
Because the Mile Road is something that's the Mile Road that I come from. And I must say that speaking about the Mile Road, I think it was Commissioner Gerard, the first asphalted road we had was between Georgetown and West Bay. And when they were voting funds in the vestry to build it, to put asphalt on this, Commissioner Gerard told them they must enlarge their graveyards because the traffic there would be speeders on the road, and that would increase the movement of traffic. So he told them that they would have to increase their graveyards because of accidents that would come from it. So that's when we moved from Mile Road to asphalted roads.
Yes. Well, I hope that in moments like this, Cayman Mall Road takes people back a little bit to the original Mall Road and those beautiful stories, and that's just part of our history, and that's why I chose the name Mall Road in there, because I thought that was certainly indicative of part of our history.
It's appropriately named, I'll tell you that.
For sure.
And I wish you continuing success with your program.
Thank you so much.
And may God bless you and your family as you continue to contribute, because I've always believed that if you forget your past, you don't know where you're going.
Absolutely.
Yes,
for sure.
So
well, thank
it's
you
always
so
a
much.
privilege to reflect on where we came from.
Yes, thank you. All right, folks, and there's a lot of airlines, so I'm gonna take some additional little footage here and show you guys his airline plane collection. He's got miniature models here, and we'll share that with all of our listeners. So once again, folks, thank you for tuning in to another edition of Conversations With, and we have been speaking to none other than W. Norman Bodden, MBE, OBE, here today. Thank you. Beautiful, folks. So this is an actual model
Of the 800.
Of the 800, yes, gorgeous. What was the very first plane that Cayman Airways actually acquired?
Actually, Cayman Airways, I should have mentioned that, was Cayman Brac Airways, became Cayman Airways.
Oh, it started as Cayman Brac Airways.
Cayman Brac Airways was the first one.
Okay, wow. How long was it Cayman Brac Airways for?
From 1955 to 1968.
Gorgeous. And so we would have obviously had a smaller plane at that time.
Yeah.
Beautiful. And do you remember what the first aircraft was that we actually acquired?
The first aircraft that what?
That we acquired for Cayman Airways, or for Cayman Brac Airways?
Yeah, it was a 4-passenger Cessna T-50.
Wow.